What if I told you that having all your projects funding, sitting safely in your bank account on day one is actually the fastest way to bleed your budget dry?
Yeah, it goes against absolutely every instinct we have, doesn't it?
Completely. I mean, usually when you embark on a massive endeavor, say building a towering block of flats or launching a major new infrastructure program, the absolute first thing you want sorted is the resources.
Right, you want the certainty.
Exactly. You want the materials stacked high on site, you want the money sitting securely in the bank, and absolutely everything ready to go from the jump.
It is, it's the universal comfort blanket of project management. The instinct is always to secure everything up front to insulate yourself from risk.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. The prevailing logic dictates that, if you have the cash and the bricks on day one, a supply chain hiccup on day 50 won't derail your critical path.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because welcome to today's Bespoke Deep Dive, where our mission is to completely flip how you think about funding and supplying projects.
And we really are flipping it on its head today.
We are. We've got this fascinating stack of audio notes, Gantt charts, and financial graphics comparing two vastly different project management strategies. And the big question we're posing to you today is this.
Right.
When you're running a massive operation, is it actually better to secure your money and materials as soon as possible, or should you be aiming to receive them at the absolute last minute?
To answer that, we really need to dissect the baseline mindset first.
The usual way of doing things.
Exactly. The traditional model, which most project managers operate under instinctively, is as soon as possible, or ASE.
Right. Get it all in straight away.
Yes. But the sources we are looking at reveal a highly counterintuitive truth. Systematically delaying your supply, whether we're talking about liquid cash or physical materials, is actually far superior for the overall health and profitability of the project.
Now, to really get our heads around why delaying things is brilliant rather than terrifying, I want you to picture Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, brilliant analogy.
Right. So specifically, imagine you were tasked with organizing one of the spectacular Samba school parades at the Sambadrome during Carnival.
That is a massive logistical matrix.
Unbelievably massive. You've got these towering, glittering, multi-story floats that need to make their way down the avenue.
Okay.
Now, you absolutely do not want those massive floats arriving weeks early, parked in the middle of the vibrant streets of Rio, causing absolute gridlock.
No, the disruption to the city's ecosystem would be immense. You'd have chaos.
Total chaos. But conversely, if they arrive a minute too late, the entire parade grinds to a halt, and you lose the competition.
Right, so the objective is perfect, down to the wire synchronization. The float arrives exactly when the dancers and the rhythm section are ready to integrate with it.
Exactly.
And that exact same logistical philosophy is what we should be applying to project funding.
Right, so let's look at what happens when people ignore that and go for the comfortable ASAP approach. In the sources, we're looking at this graphic, figure 1.
Yeah, figure 1, which represents the traditional method.
Right, and in this model, a major project is being funded in very rigid, equal chunks. The money arrives in tranches of 600,000 Brazilian reais, just dropping into the project's bank account month after month.
But here is the issue. Construction isn't linear.
No, not at all.
You don't spend exactly 600,000 reais every single month. So these equal chunks are arriving far earlier than the builders actually consume the capital.
Which creates a very specific, and I mean highly problematic, financial anomaly.
Yeah.
When you map this out visually, like in the daily, weekly, and monthly cash flow charts we've got here, you see the money rushing in exponentially faster than the site burns through it.
It just piles up.
It does. Consequently, the accumulated positive balance in the project's account begins to compound and swell. It forms these steep ascending step functions on the graph.
Yeah, it creates a massive idle mountain of cash.
It really does. Honestly, looking at the silhouette of this accumulated capital on the graph, it looks strikingly like Sugarloaf Mountain, Punta towering over the Rio skyline. It's just a gigantic peak of money sitting there.
It is a phenomenal visual representation of what we call operational slack. Project managers intentionally build that Sugarloaf Mountain of cash because it acts as a massive buffer.
For peace of mind.
Exactly. If a subcontractor suddenly raises their rates or foundation work takes twice as long, the money is right there. It provides immense psychological comfort to the team on the ground.
But there's a catch.
A huge one. The severe hidden flaw here is the unnecessary immobilization of capital.
And there is a very specific, painful price tag attached to that psychological comfort. Let's break down the actual numbers from the text, because this blew my mind.
The numbers are stark.
They really are. So the fixed cost of the building works in our case study, that's labor, the concrete, the architectural fees, the whole lot, is exactly 5,152,810 Brazilian reais and 40 cents.
Right, just over 5.15 million.
But because the management is using this inefficient, heavily buffered ASAP funding model, the total investment they actually have to extract from the financiers gets artificially inflated to 5.4 million reais.
What's fascinating here is they are overcapitalizing the project by roughly $250,000 purely to maintain that comfortable idle surplus at the top of the mountain.
Just to feel safe. And that extra $250,000 isn't buying higher quality finishings, is it?
Not at all. It isn't hiring better structural engineers or accelerating the timeline. It is simply existing in a dormant state.
There's a brilliant Portuguese phrase used in the source notes to describe this. They say the money is just sitting there, à toa.
Ah, yes, a toa.
Just idling, doing absolutely nothing but gathering dust in the project's current account while the investor could have been using it elsewhere.
Precisely. It is mathematically inefficient. And when you scale that inefficiency up to, say, billion-pound infrastructure projects, the wasted capital is staggering.
Which makes total sense.
That inefficiency is exactly what necessitates a radical pivot away from ASAP.
Right, which brings us to the counter methodology from Figure 2, ALE, as late as possible.
The ALAP revolution.
Now, I have to step in here and challenge this entirely. Because when you tell a project director to fund something as late as possible, you are basically inducing a panic attack.
Oh, absolutely. It sounds terrifying.
I mean, calculated timing is great in a spreadsheet, but we live in the real world. What about supply chain shocks? If a cargo ship gets stuck in a canal or a primary cement supplier goes into administration, your calculated ALAP strategy has just bankrupted the project because you have zero buffer.
It's a very fair point.
How does this model account for real-world chaos without destroying the Samba parade?
It's a completely necessary challenge, but it cuts to the core misunderstanding of the methodology. ALAP is not synonymous with just-in-time taken to a reckless zero-margin extreme.
Okay, so it's not about being on the absolute bleeding edge.
No, not at all. It does not mean being disorganized or operating without a safety net. ALAP means pushing the arrival of your funds to the latest possible date that still mathematically guarantees funding for what needs to be paid, including factored risk.
Included the factored risk. I see.
Yes. Exactly. It is about forensic precision, not procrastination. You aren't eliminating the buffer, you are calculating its exact minimum requirement rather than blindly throwing $250,000 at it.
So, rather than a blanket comfort zone, it's a highly tailored risk profile.
Spot on.
And we see this shift when we look at how the ALAP funding is actually structured in Figure 2. The variables completely change.
They do. They stop doing those uniform drops.
Right. The management isn't just blindly dropping 600,000 rays into the account every month to build Sugarloaf. The funding chunks become highly variable. They shift to 400,000, then 600,000, then 700,000 rays.
Because they are perfectly synchronized, they undulate to match the actual real-time S-curve of consumption on the building site.
And this is where the underlying mechanics of project finance really start to work in your favor, isn't it?
It's massive. By shifting to ALA, the investor fundamentally alters the present value of their capital.
The audio notes highlight a massive benefit here.
Yeah, they gain 2 to 3 whole months where their money is not trapped in the project account. Think about the opportunity cost of the ASA method. For months, that money was sitting a TOA, basically depreciating against inflation.
Whereas with ALAP, for an extra 2 to 3 months, that money remains in the investor's private portfolio.
Exactly. It's earning vital financial interest, or it's being leveraged into other investments. It is actively working for them.
So what does this all mean for the bottom line?
Well, because the investor isn't forced to maintain that massive Sugarloaf-sized buffer, the total investment required drops from 5.4 million reais down to 5.3 million.
Even though the actual physical cost of the works is identical.
Exactly, still roughly 5.15 million. But the investor has committed significantly less excess capital to achieve the exact same physical building.
And by the end of the project, instead of a mountain of idle cash, the leftover balance is just a tiny, highly efficient margin.
Yes, and the source delightfully refers to this mathematically optimized remainder as a miserinha.
A miserinha. I love that term. Just a tiny, negligible scrap.
Yep, a miserinha. You have paid for every single brick, every hour of labor, absorbed your standard deviations of risk, and you haven't left a fortune locked up in a dormant account.
But pulling this off, must require a level of administrative control that goes far beyond standard accounting.
Oh, it absolutely does. It requires an entirely different way of interacting with the project's critical path. Let's talk about the scheduling.
Right, let's dive back into the Gantt charts from Figure 2.
Anyone who has managed a project knows the standard Gantt chart. You know, those cascading horizontal bars that track tasks over time. But to execute ALAP, you have to move past basic scheduling and introduce complex data overlays.
Specifically identifying what the methodology terms the yellow and orange zones.
Exactly.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of these zones, starting with the yellow zone. This is defined in the source as the window of temporal repositioning.
Right. Temporal repositioning is essentially the mathematical calculation of slack on a non-critical path.
So a bit of wiggle room.
Exactly. Say you have a specific task, like installing the internal wiring. That task requires a tranche of funding. The yellow zone is the calculated time frame where that funding can be safely moved around, delayed, or repositioned without delaying the subsequent tasks or the final delivery date.
Meaning you have strategic flexibility here.
Yes. You can decide to hold the cash in your interest-bearing account for another 2 weeks because the math proves it won't impact the site.
That is brilliant. But then you transition out of that flexible yellow zone and you hit the orange zone.
The high sensitivity boundary.
Right.
The orange zone represents the evaporation of slack. You are right on the wire. This marks the absolute latest mathematical boundary, factoring in lead times and processing delays right before the site's consumption effectively demands that resource.
And if you cross it,
If you push the funding past the orange zone, you suffer a rupture. Physics and economics take over. You default on a vendor, you can't buy the diesel for the excavators, the workers down tools, and the project bleeds money in delay penalties.
let's go back to Rio for a second to really visualize the mechanics of this, because it feels exactly like driving a 40-ton lorry through the chaotic traffic of Copacabana.
Oh, that's a vivid picture.
Right. When you are in the yellow zone, you are cruising down Avenida Atlantica. You have a massive stretch of open road ahead of you. You can lift your foot off the accelerator, let the momentum carry you and save fuel. You have options.
You are managing your speed with plenty of slack.
Precisely. But the orange zone, that is not just a traffic light turning red. The orange zone is the exact mathematical point on the tarmac where you must initiate braking, calculated precisely by the 40-ton weight of your vehicle and your current velocity.
Right, you can't argue with momentum.
Exactly. If you wait even 1 second past that orange line to hit the brakes, it doesn't matter how hard you push the pedal, physics dictates you're going to crash through the intersection.
That is spot on. In project finance, the orange zone is knowing the exact braking distance of your capital. You have to know precisely where that line is.
It requires highly advanced administration, doesn't it?
It does, but the efficiency you gain is vast. And this leads to the deeper paradigm shift at play here. The financial model is no longer just a static spreadsheet telling the accounting department how much money is needed.
It's much more active.
Yes, it becomes a dynamic scheduling tool telling the project director until when they can delay financing without causing a rupture. Funding is no longer treated as an abstract concept. It is treated as a scheduled physical resource, exactly like a crane or a bulldozer.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because you just mentioned physical resources. The fourth audio source makes it clear that this methodology doesn't stop at bank balances and cash flows.
No, it extends out to everything.
It applies this exact same rigorous ALA philosophy to the physical materials arriving on the building site. The bricks, the mortar, the steel, the glass. How does this logic work on a physical building site?
Well, if you synthesize the logic of financial ALA and apply it to physical supply chains, you unlock two massive logistical advantages that drastically reduce the shadow costs of a project.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is, again, pure financial value based on present value mechanics.
Because if you delay the materials, you delay the invoice.
Correct. You delay the payment for the physical goods until the exact moment the critical path demands them. You are keeping your capital in your own portfolio, actively working for you, rather than converting it into a pile of cement sitting in the rain 3 months before you even pour the foundation.
Which leads directly to the second massive advantage, the sheer logistics of space and storage.
We tend to forget that physical things have an ongoing cost just to exist in a space.
Oh, absolutely. The administrative burden of managing early materials is a massive, often uncalculated drain on project efficiency.
I want you, the listener, to imagine this. Imagine acquiring mountains of steel rebar, pallets of high-end floor tiles, and hundreds of bags of cement, and dropping them onto a muddy, chaotic building site weeks or months before the foremen are ready to use them.
It sounds like a nightmare.
It is. You aren't just storing them, you are actively managing a logistical nightmare. In a dense urban environment, physical space is at an absolute premium. And you incur compounding shadow costs. For instance, you have to hire 24-hour security to ensure thousands of pounds worth of copper wiring doesn't mysteriously vanish in the middle of the night.
Exactly. And you have to double handle materials. The excavators need to dig exactly where you stacked the steel, so you end up paying laborers to move the steel to the other side of the site.
Which is just a massive waste of time and money.
And then you have elemental degradation. You have to buy heavy-duty tarpaulins to protect the cement from the rain, and if the damp gets in anyway, you throw it away and buy it twice.
You are essentially paying money to run a highly inefficient warehousing operation on your own construction site, risking damage, theft, and constant double handling, all because the project manager wanted the comfort of seeing the materials ASAP.
It is the physical manifestation of the Sugarloaf Mountain of cash, isn't it?
It really is. It is immobilized capital that is actively degrading. The goal of physical ALAP is to perfectly marry the supply curve with the consumption curve, eliminating that makeshift warehouse entirely.
It brings us right back to our Samba parade analogy. You would never construct a massive, cumbersome carnival float and park it in the middle of a busy Rio intersection a month before Carnival actually starts.
Of course not. It would block traffic, the sun would bleach the paint, the rain would ruin the feathers, and you'd have to pay a team of people just to stand there and guard it.
It's ludicrous when you frame it like that. You assemble it, you time it perfectly, and you roll it onto the avenue at the exact moment the music swells. You absolutely shouldn't park expensive, bulky materials on a site before the tradesmen are ready to assemble them.
That is the essence of this entire methodology. Consumption is the mathematical curve of what the project eats, money, materials, man-hours. Supply is the mathematical curve of what you feed it. If supply enters the system too early, you generate massive shadow costs through the unnecessary immobilization of capital and physical space. If it enters too late, past that orange high sensitivity zone we talked about, you suffer a rupture. ALAP is the rigorously calculated art of matching those two curves with the absolute minimum excess possible.
Okay, let's synthesize this brilliantly counterintuitive deep dive. The traditional, comfortable ASE method gives you an incredibly expensive illusion of security. You get this Sugarloaf Mountain of cash sitting at TOA, doing nothing but depreciating, inflating your required investment by hundreds of thousands of rays, and cluttering your physical site with premature materials that demand constant, costly babysitting.
While the ALAP method, as late as possible, strips away all that fat.
Exactly. It gives you a sleek, perfectly timed, mathematically rigorous project. It keeps your capital working for you in the bank for an extra 2 to 3 months, slashes your shadow costs, and leaves you with nothing but a highly efficient miserinia at the end.
I think the ultimate takeaway here is that true mastery of a project requires a complete perspective shift. You must stop looking at your inputs, every pound spent, every brick laid, every piece of machinery hired, as static necessities on a procurement checklist.
They're dynamic.
Yes, they are highly volatile elements on a timeline. When you master the mechanics of that timeline and understand exactly where your yellow and orange zones lie, the budget largely manages itself.
And it leads me to a final, slightly provocative thought I want to leave you with, building on the mechanics we've explored today. We've seen how powerfully the ALAP strategy works for corporate finance, opportunity costs, and physical construction materials. But what about your own personal energy, your mental bandwidth, and your attention?
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Think about it. In our daily lives, we constantly operate on an ASAP basis. We rush to tackle every problem, reply to every email, and resolve every anxiety the absolute second it appears.
We do. We front-load our stress to get that psychological comfort of having dealt with it.
Right. But just like the early cement on the building site, that front-loaded stress requires constant mental babysitting. It clutters our minds and leads to burnout, a sort of idle exhaustion where we are spending energy but achieving nothing.
We're just guarding the floats in the rain.
Exactly. What if we started applying the rigorous calculations of ALAP to our own mental resources? What if we identified our own yellow zones and practiced delaying our worry, our hyperfocus, and our emotional effort until the exact moment it's actually required to yield a tangible result?
we might find we have a lot more mental capital left over.
A nice little mental miseria in the bank at the end of the day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep challenging those comfortable assumptions, keep refining your timelines, and until next time, keep looking for the smartest way to time your parade.